Hey there, fellow horror fans. Gather round as I share a tale that'll send shivers down your spine and make you think twice about spending a night alone. This one's not for the faint of heart, so dim the lights, grab a blanket, and prepare to be transported into a world where solitude becomes your worst nightmare. I never thought much about being alone. In fact, I used to crave it. The peace, the quiet, it was my escape from the chaos of everyday life. But that all changed on a night I'll never forget. It was a Friday evening, and I had just settled into my apartment after a long week at work. My roommate was out of town, leaving me with the place to myself. I decided to make the most of it, ordering my favorite takeout and queuing up a horror movie marathon. As the credits rolled on the second film, I noticed the silence creeping in. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic, it all seemed to fade away, leaving me in an unsettling quiet. I shook off the feeling and headed to the kitchen for a snack. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible, coming from somewhere in the apartment. "Hello?" I called out, my voice wavering. No response. I laughed nervously, chalking it up to an overactive imagination fueled by too many scary movies. But as I turned to head back to the living room, I froze. There, in the hallway mirror, I saw a figure standing behind me. I whirled around, heart pounding, but there was nothing there. When I looked back at the mirror, my reflection was alone once again. "Get it together," I muttered to myself, running a shaky hand through my hair. "It's just your mind playing tricks on you." I decided to call it a night, hoping sleep would reset my frayed nerves. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows seemed to dance and twist in the corners of my vision. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to fall asleep. Just as I was drifting off, a sound jolted me awake, the creak of a floorboard, as if someone was walking down the hallway. My eyes flew open, and I held my breath, straining to listen. Creak, creak, creak. The footsteps were getting closer. I sat up, my heart hammering in my chest. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I watched in horror as the doorknob slowly began to turn. "This isn't real," I told myself, squeezing my eyes shut. "When I open them, everything will be normal." But when I opened my eyes, the door was wide open, revealing a darkness so thick it seemed to pulse and breathe. And then, from the depths of that darkness, came a voice, raspy, ancient, and filled with malice. "We've been waiting for you," it hissed. I scrambled out of bed, fumbling for my phone. As the screen lit up, I caught a glimpse of something in the doorway, a figure, tall and emaciated, with skin like cracked parchment and eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light. I screamed, dropping my phone and bolting for the window. As I struggled with the latch, I felt icy fingers brush against the back of my neck. "You can't escape us," the voice whispered, its breath cold against my ear. "We are the shadows in the corners, the whispers in the dark. We are the fear that lives in solitude." I finally managed to wrench the window open and climbed out onto the fire escape. The cool night air hit me like a slap, and I gulped it down, trying to clear my head. But as I looked back into my bedroom, I realized with growing horror that the nightmare wasn't confined to my apartment. The entire city seemed different, darker, more sinister. Windows that should have been lit were pitch black, and the streets were empty, devoid of the usual nighttime bustle. I heard movement from inside my room and knew I couldn't stay there. With shaking legs, I made my way down the fire escape, each step feeling like it might be my last. As I reached the alley below, a chilling laugh echoed through the air. I spun around, trying to locate its source, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Did you really think you could run?" the voice taunted. "We are everywhere. We are everything you fear in the dark." I took off running, my bare feet slapping against the cold pavement. The city around me twisted and warped, familiar landmarks becoming grotesque parodies of themselves. Shadows seemed to reach out, trying to grab me as I passed. I don't know how long I ran, or where I was going. All I knew was that I couldn't stop, couldn't look back. Because if I did, I was sure I'd see them, the entities that had invaded my solitude, turning my peaceful night alone into a waking nightmare. As I rounded a corner, I collided with something solid. I stumbled back, ready to run again, when I heard a familiar voice. "Whoa, hey, are you okay?" I looked up to see my neighbor, Mark, staring at me with concern. Behind him, the street was lit and bustling with activity. I don't know," I stammered, looking around wildly. Everything seemed normal again, but I could still feel the lingering presence of something. Mark placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Why don't you come inside for a bit? I'll make some tea." I hesitated, glancing back towards my apartment building. For a moment, I thought I saw a face in one of the windows, gaunt, with glowing eyes. But when I blinked, it was gone. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaky. "Yeah, that sounds good." As we walked towards Mark's building, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The shadows seemed to stretch a little too long, the darkness a little too deep. And just before we stepped inside, I heard it again, that raspy, ancient whisper, carried on the night breeze. "We'll be waiting for you, in the silence, in the solitude. You can't escape us forever." I shuddered and hurried inside, the door closing behind us with a final sounding click. But even as the warmth and light of Mark's apartment enveloped me, I knew the truth. This was far from over. The entities that had found me in my solitude were still out there, waiting. And sooner or later, I would be alone again. As I sat in Mark's apartment, clutching a mug of tea with trembling hands, I couldn't shake the feeling that the nightmare wasn't over. Mark's concerned gaze boring to me as I recounted my terrifying experience, careful to omit the more unbelievable details. "Look," he said, "why don't you crash here tonight? It's late, and you seem pretty shaken up." I nodded gratefully, relief washing over me at the thought of not being alone. But as Mark set up the couch for me, a chill ran down my spine. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to pulse and writhe, just beyond the edge of my vision. Sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, my dreams were plagued by visions of grotesque figures and echoing whispers. I jolted awake in the early hours of the morning, drenched in sweat and gasping for air. The apartment was silent. Too silent. "Mark?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. No response. I stumbled off the couch, my heart racing as I made my way to Mark's bedroom. The door creaked open, revealing an empty, undisturbed bed. A note on the nightstand caught my eye. Had to run out for work. "Help yourself to anything in the kitchen." Mark relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. As I turned to leave the room, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. But it wasn't me staring back. The face in the glass was gaunt and pale, with sunken eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light. A wide, unnatural grin split its features. "Did you think you could escape us?" it hissed, its voice a cacophony of whispers. I stumbled backward, crashing into the wall. The mirror shattered, shards of glass raining down around me. But instead of my own terrified reflection, each piece showed a different nightmarish visage, all leering at me with malevolent glee. I ran from the room, my bare feet crunching on broken glass. The apartment had changed, the walls now covered in pulsating, fleshy growths. The air was thick with the stench of decay. "This isn't real," I muttered, squeezing my eyes shut. "Wake up, wake up, wake up." But when I opened my eyes, the nightmare persisted. The growths on the walls had sprouted eyes, all blinking in unison, following my every move. I made a dash for the front door, but it melted away as I approached, revealing a swirling vortex of darkness beyond. Spectral hands reached out, grasping at me, their touch like ice against my skin. "Join us," they whispered. "Become one with the solitude, the fear, the darkness." I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a dream, a hallucination, anything but reality. As I backed away, I felt something solid behind me. Spinning around, I found myself face to face with a full-length mirror that hadn't been there before. My reflection stared back at me, but something was off. Its movements were just slightly out of sync with my own. "What's happening to me?" I whispered. My reflection's lips curled into a sinister smile. "We're freeing you," it said, its voice a chorus of whispers. "Embracing your deepest fears, your darkest solitude." I watched in horror as my reflection began to change. Its skin grew pale and translucent, its eyes sinking into dark sockets. It reached out, its hand pressing against the glass from the other side. "Join us," it hissed. "Become one with the nightmare." In that moment, I realized the truth. The entities hadn't invaded my solitude, they had been born from it. My fears, my isolation, my deepest, darkest thoughts, they had taken form, feeding off my terror and growing stronger with each passing moment. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "No," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "You're not real. You only have power because I give it to you." The creatures howled in rage, the walls of the apartment shaking with their fury. But I stood my ground, focusing on the warmth of the sun I knew was rising outside, the sounds of the city waking up, the connection I had with the world beyond my own fears. "I am not alone," I declared. "And I am not afraid." The mirror cracked, spiderweb fissures spreading across its surface. The nightmare creatures shrieked, their forms beginning to dissolve like smoke in the wind. I closed my eyes, concentrating on pushing away the fear, the isolation, the darkness that had allowed these entities to manifest. When I opened them again, I was back in Mark's apartment, the real one, bathed in the soft light of dawn streaming through the windows. Mark burst through the front door, concern etched on his face. "Are you okay?" he asked breathlessly. "I got home and heard you shouting." I looked around, taking in the normal, unthreatening surroundings. The mirror in the hallway showed only my own reflection, tired but very much alive. "I'm okay," I said, surprised to find that I meant it. I think I'm going to be okay." As Mark fussed over me, insisting on making breakfast and calling in sick to work to keep me company, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The nightmare was over, not because I had escaped it, but because I had faced it head on. I knew then that the true horror hadn't been the entities themselves, but the isolating fear that had given birth to them. And in conquering that fear, in reaching out and reconnecting with the world around me, I had found the key to banishing the darkness. As I sat with Mark, laughing over burnt toast and sharing stories, I made a silent promise to myself. I would never again let solitude become a breeding ground for fear. Because in the end, the most powerful weapon against the darkness is the light of human connection. The whispers in the dark may always be there, waiting in the shadows of our minds. But as long as we remember that we're not truly alone, they can never fully take hold. And that, I realized, is the greatest victory of all.